else can parents practically do, or what are some like tips that they can follow in order to get the baby into a good sleeping pattern and habits?
Okay, I would say that within the first couple of weeks, a good thing to do is to teach your baby to differentiate between day and night, because they work on a 24-hour clock and have no distinction. So therefore, to create a nighttime routine where your baby gets taken away from the daytime environment into a much quieter one, and you start a sequence of events like either a change and a massage, or a bath and a massage, moving into the bedroom for the last feed, is quite important. When you do any night feeds, you follow the same pattern. Keep it quite businesslike, very quiet, no lights, no TVs. Just keep it very quiet, very gentle. And as soon as your baby's fed and winded, you can lay them down. The other thing that's actually quite important here is to recognize that your babies ideally will start to feed more in the day than they will at night. So it's a bit of a continuum, if you like, that your baby will probably feed equally frequently day and night for the first week or two. If you're lucky, they won't, but in the main, you can expect them to wake around 3 hourly at night. In the first days, they're going to need approximately 8 feeds over 24 hours. As they head nearer 6 weeks, they're probably going to drop one of those. As they head another couple of weeks on, they'll probably drop another one. But what you're aiming to do is not let the distance between daytime feeds become too long, because it's very tempting as a parent, if you've got, you know, a 5-week-old baby, to think, oh yes, we're out for a walk, they've had a nice 2.5 hours sleep, we'll let them sleep a bit longer, and before you know it, that's 4.5 hours. Then they might go 3.5 before the next one. But because they work on a 24-hour clock and they've got to get a certain amount of milk in that time, what happens is they wake up more hungry in the night.
Yeah.
So you're trying to gradually adjust that balance so that naturally between what I call daylight hours of, well, let's say day waking hours of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., you're trying to get more feeds in so that you might only get 2 night feeds to start with, hopefully dropping to 1.
Yeah, I remember that was exactly the issue with my first one. He would love the very long daytime naps. And then he'd be sleeping much less during the night, because during the night he kept waking up because he was hungry. So like you said, first we needed to teach him that there is a difference between day and night, and actually that it's the opposite of what he was thinking, which took us weeks. And then figure out what is the right pattern of like nighttime sleeping and daytime sleeping. Well,
and I think the important thing also to remember is that this principle is for relatively small babies. You know, if you've got a 9-month-old baby that does want to sleep for 2 hours or whatever in the day, you don't wake them up. If you've got a tiny baby that is going, say, 4.5 hours between feeds, after about 3 hours, you might start thinking, well, I'm going to undo the swaddle a little bit and maybe just lift the curtains and just gently let them try and very gently bring them back so that you can offer a feed a little bit sooner.
Okay. All right. If there was one thing we can leave new parents with when it comes to sleeping, what would be sort of your message, your top advice?
Okay. For the first 2 weeks, allow them, if they want to fall asleep on you for some feeds during the day. Don't put yourselves on a guilt trip that you are cuddling your baby. Your baby needs to learn about the world, and the biggest focus of security and the biggest center of security is his parents or his main carers. I think allow yourself that 2 weeks to kind of get into a rhythm, and then towards the end of that period, start looking at your day-night distinction. Day-night distinction is key. Frequency of feeds during the day then comes into it, and it's a gradual progression.
Okay.
These things all happen gradually.
And then after this sort of first step, you mentioned earlier sort of props that we parents use to get babies to sleep, and props can be anything from, you know, gently rocking the baby to walking up and down the stairs, or putting them in a car to fall asleep, or, you know, feeding them to fall asleep, or giving them a dummy. And these are all very different. You know, my understanding is that some of them are okay and some of them are less okay. not because there's anything wrong with them per se, but because they lead into bad habits, which then, make your life far less sustainable. So how do you think about props and what's useful and what's not?
I think persistence is the biggest issue. The more you do it, the more a baby relies on it. So I would say use them as and when necessary, not as an automatic reflex. So let's say, for example, you're trying to settle your baby for the bedtime feed. If you try to start laying your baby down when they've been winded and they're fully fed and they're a bit fractious, just try putting a hand on them or just going shh, shh, shh. Don't make it the first port of call to pick them out and recuddle them. And if you do pick them up, if you do have to recourse to that, don't immediately start going into the rocking. Do it on a need to do basis. If your fallback position is always the absolute max of disturbance and what they need to, what they feel they need at that moment, you are going to get into difficulties, because those are the cues that your baby will learn as the conditions to get to sleep.
Yeah, so every time then they get into the light sleep during their nap or a night, which is typically every 20 minutes at the beginning,
yes,
they will wake up because they will not have that prop, which in this case would be like a strong cuddle, right? And if you don't
you're
give
right.
them that, or if they don't get that, they don't feel that when they get into light sleep,
Yes,
they'll wake up. Whereas
yes,
if in the first place they were able to fall asleep without that, then
yes.
when it comes to light sleep, they'll actually be able to settle back themselves.
You've exactly got it there. And I think I'm never going to advocate that you don't give your baby what your baby needs at that moment in time, but just take that little step back and think, actually, if my baby's crying in a cot and they're not inconsolable, they're just giving a little murmur and a whinge, don't always intervene, because all babies wake up and murmur. And if you respond at the first murmur, that is what they will learn to expect. And then if you don't deliver that, they up the ante.
Yeah.
So I would call it level 1, 2, 3 crying. So a level 1 is just like a little intermittent murmur or grumble, and it stops and it starts. Try leaving your baby and giving them time to resettle before jumping in. If it escalates a little bit and goes into something a bit more consistent, go in, but start with a hand touch and a verbal soothe, and only go into the pickup if that really isn't working. And as soon as they're quiet, when you pick them up, you lay them gently back down again and repeat that, rather than keep holding them until they go to sleep. So again, it's the continuum, and it's doing things gradually rather than jumping in to go to the max immediately, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and at the beginning, of course, we all want to hold the babies, and it's like so nice to cuddle
Natural.
them. But you quickly realize that you can't offer a cuddle every 30 minutes in every
No,
24-hour period,
no,
right?
yeah.
So it's important to recognize that if you're cuddling baby during the day when you're awake and that suits you, when the night comes, the baby will want the same.
You've got it. You've got it. Yeah.
You
I
have
mean,
to find
that said,
fine balance, right?
it's a very fine balance. And I would never say to a mum, don't sit and cuddle your baby. We've all been there, a wet winter's afternoon, fed your baby, tucked up, watching the TV. It's wonderful. That's why you have a baby, is to nurture it and love it. But you also have to teach it about the separation to you. So I would say it's balance in all things. It's all about balance, and having the right information and seeking the right guidance before it reaches a point where you've got a 3 or a 6-month-old baby who simply will not lie in a cot and go to sleep.
Yeah.
Or is still co-sleeping and is crawling in so close to you that they can feed at will right the way through the night. That's when you've got bigger issues to deal with. It's all manageable, but it means you've got more work to do.
Yeah. And just to be very clear, right, we parents, it's not like we want babies to sleep so that we can have free time or whatever. It's because babies really need sleep for development of their brain, development or their immune system, generally for growth. That's when they're growing, right? So babies actually do need to sleep. It's not a selfish thing that parents strive for.
Absolutely not. And I recommend sometimes that parents rest rather than catching up on all the chores, because they need sleep too. And in fact, if you look at the sleep needs of a baby between 0 to 1 month and 6 months, it only drops by a couple of hours. So a 6-month-old baby will still need about 14 hours of sleep. They'll just take it in different chunks. You know, you'd hope they'd be sleeping through the night and they'd be having 2 fairly good sleeps during the day. So it all kind of changes. Nothing ever stays the same with babies. And that sometimes parents find quite difficult. You know, they expect them to be doing something a month and therefore they'll be doing it at 2 months or 3 months. And just when you think you've got on top of it, they change the goalpost. You know, that's the nature of babies. And I think the other thing is, you know, as your baby gets older, they start to learn what they want, whereas you as a parent know what they need. And of course, if you let that run and run and run, you've then got to reassert that this is actually what you need, which is sleep. And chronic sleep deprivation, as you've already pointed out, leads to chronic hyperactivity.
Which leads to a lot of developmental and health issues.
Yeah.
So it's quite important to get the good sleeping habits and good sleeping patterns in place quite early on. And when you're not working residentially with parents, is this a type of support that can be offered to parents via video calls like this one? Have you found
Absolutely. It's extremely effective. I've been doing it for many years by word of mouth from previous clients who, you know, I've worked with them as newborns, and maybe at 4-6 months they'll contact me. And it really does, because it isn't rocket science. It's quite formulaic. The key to doing it well is to listen to the parent's story, see where they're at the moment, and see what their parenting style is before you choose the process that you use. It's not radically different, but the approach to it and the time that you take will be different, because if you're not working with parents and in a style that works for them, you're not helping them at all. It's crucially important, and that's why people come unstuck sometimes with books, because it will follow a formula and they're not comfortable with it, so they bounce to another one. Whereas because of the years of experience, I've drawn in all sorts of models, and I can cherry pick and amalgamate them and work with parents until we find a method that actually does work, that they're comfortable with.
Fantastic. It's really good to know that this is a service that parents can get regardless of whether there is a coronavirus outbreak out there or not.
And even better, it's a really lovely piece of work to do. I love it.
Super. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us, Dawn.
My pleasure.